My fiancé invited her ex to our wedding, so I invited his wife as my plus one. The rehearsal dinner? Legendary. I'm not the type to make rash decisions or chase drama, but when someone forces your hand, you play the cards they've dealt. What happened at that waterfront restaurant became the stuff of family legend, and honestly, I'd do it all over again. I'm Ryan, 34, a commercial real estate analyst in Boston. Bethany and I had been together for 3 years, and our wedding was set for an upscale vineyard outside the city in 5 weeks. We'd planned everything down to the smallest detail: 180 guests, a string quartet for the ceremony, an 8-piece jazz band for the reception. I'd handled most of the major vendor deposits since her family insisted on traditional arrangements where the groom covers those expenses. We were sitting at our favorite sushi place on Newberry Street, one of those quiet Tuesday evenings where you just enjoy being together, when she dropped the bomb so casually I almost missed it. "So I invited Marcus to the ceremony," she said, picking at her salmon roll like she just mentioned ordering extra napkins. Marcus. Her college ex-boyfriend. I set down my chopsticks carefully, taking a moment to process. "Marcus from BU? The guy you dated junior year?" She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "He's married now, and his wife has a business trip to Singapore that weekend, so I thought it would be nice to include him. We've stayed friendly and he's been really supportive during the planning." Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing this conversation in the mirror. I tried to be reasonable about it, tried to be the secure, mature guy who doesn't get threatened by exes. "Okay," I said slowly. "I mean, it's a little unusual, but if you guys are just friends and he's married, I guess it's fine." That's when I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her water glass. "What's his wife's name again?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Jennifer," she said immediately, then her eyes widened slightly. "I mean Janet. Sorry, I always mix those up. Janet." She laughed, but it sounded forced and brittle. I nodded and changed the subject, but my mind was already working through the discrepancy. People don't usually mix up their friend's spouse's name, especially not when they're supposedly close enough to warrant a wedding invitation. That night, after Bethany fell asleep, I did what any suspicious person in 2024 would do. I went to social media. Found Marcus's profile easily enough since Bethany still followed him. Scrolled through his recent posts and there she was in his photos, his wife. Caroline, not Jennifer or Janet. Caroline. A pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital according to her profile, definitely not on some business trip to Singapore. She looked happy in their pictures together, genuinely in love with this guy who was apparently now invited to my wedding under false pretenses. I should have confronted Bethany right then, but something told me to dig deeper first. Her tablet was still on the coffee table, and I knew her passcode because we'd always been open about that stuff. I hesitated for maybe 30 seconds before unlocking it, telling myself I was just being thorough, that I deserved to know the truth before our wedding. What I found made my stomach drop. Months of messages between Bethany and Marcus, late-night conversations that went well past midnight. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" from Bethany at 1:47 a.m. 3 weeks ago. "All the time. Especially lately," from Marcus at 2:03 a.m. Photos he'd sent her from his home gym, shirtless bathroom mirror selfies with captions like, "Getting back in shape for something special." Her responses were enthusiastic, flirty, exactly the kind of messages you don't send to someone you're just friends with. There were inside jokes, references to memories they'd shared, reminiscing about their college relationship in ways that felt distinctly present tense. "Remember that weekend in Newport when it rained the whole time and we never left the hotel?" she'd written. "Best weekend of my life," he'd replied, followed by, "We should talk more about the wedding. I'm really looking forward to it." I sat there on our couch at 2:30 a.m., reading through months of emotional infidelity, feeling like an absolute idiot. The wedding wasn't just some friendly gesture. It was something else entirely, something that made me feel sick to my stomach. I took screenshots of everything, methodically documenting the conversations, the photos, the timestamps. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there next to Bethany trying to figure out what to do with this information and wondering how long she'd been planning this, whatever this was. I spent the entire weekend wrestling with what I discovered, taking long walks along the Charles River and trying to organize my thoughts. Part of me felt guilty about going through Bethany's tablet, violating her privacy like that. But the bigger part knew that what she was doing was exponentially worse than my investigation. By Sunday night, I'd made my decision. If Bethany wanted to invite Marcus to our wedding under false pretenses, I'd respond in kind. I needed to find Caroline and tell her what was happening. Monday morning, I was at my desk by 7, running on coffee and determination. Boston Children's Hospital had a staff directory on their website, and I found Caroline listed under pediatric nursing. I crafted a careful message from my verified work email, making sure it looked professional and legitimate. Dear Caroline, my name is Ryan, and I'm engaged to Bethany. I apologize for the unusual nature of this message, but I believe you deserve to know that my fiancé has invited your husband Marcus to our wedding in 5 weeks, claiming that you'll be on a business trip to Singapore that weekend. I recently discovered months of inappropriate late-night messages between them, and I felt you should be aware of what's happening. I've attached some screenshots for your reference. Again, I apologize for any distress this causes, but I'd want to know if I were in your position. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then spent the next 2 hours unable to focus on anything else. Every time my email pinged, my heart jumped. Caroline's response came at 9:47 a.m. Ryan, thank you for reaching out. I'm absolutely devastated but grateful for your honesty. Marcus told me he has a mandatory corporate retreat in the Berkshires that weekend for his consulting firm. I had no idea about any wedding or that he's been in contact with an ex-girlfriend. The screenshots you sent are horrifying. Would you be willing to talk by phone? I think we need to discuss this further. We exchanged numbers and spoke for nearly an hour during my lunch break. Caroline was sharp, articulate, and clearly processing some deep betrayals in real time. Marcus has been different for about 6 months, she told me, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Emotionally distant, working late constantly, suddenly obsessed with buying expensive cologne and new clothes. I thought it was a midlife crisis thing, but this makes so much more sense now. He's been preparing to see her again. She paused. The business retreat story was so specific. He even showed me the fake email invitation from his firm. This has been calculated. Over the next few days, Caroline and I communicated regularly, sharing information and building a picture of just how elaborate this deception was. She discovered charges on Marcus's credit card for a boutique hotel in Newport from 3 months ago, the same weekend Bethany had posted Instagram stories about a girls' weekend with her college roommates. The timeline matched perfectly. I want to confront them, Caroline said during one of our calls. But I want to do it in a way that maximizes the impact. These people have been lying to us for months, planning whatever this is. They deserve to have it blow up in their faces. That's when I had the idea. The rehearsal dinner, I said. It's 5 days before the wedding at a waterfront restaurant in Boston. Bethany is insisting Marcus attend because he's supposedly traveling from Connecticut and deserves the hospitality, even though he only lives 45 minutes away in Cambridge. What if you came as my guest? We could end this before the actual wedding day, minimize the damage to all the other guests and vendors. There was a long pause, then Caroline laughed, sharp and determined. I love it. Let's do it. These people want drama? We'll give them drama they'll never forget. We spent the next 2 weeks planning carefully, keeping our communications private and our behavior normal. I continued wedding preparations with Bethany like nothing was wrong, which was harder than I'd imagined. Every time she mentioned Marcus, I had to bite my tongue. She kept pushing for him to sit at table 5 with my fraternity brothers rather than with her family, claiming she wanted to help him feel included since he wouldn't know many people. I noticed that table had a direct sight line to the head table where we'd be sitting. That's thoughtful of you, I said, watching her face carefully. You really want him to feel comfortable. She smiled, and for a moment I saw something calculating in her expression. Well, he's coming all this way. It's the least I can do. The week before the rehearsal dinner was torture. Bethany made increasingly suspicious decisions that I now saw with perfect clarity. She insisted on a specific seating arrangement, wanted to make sure Marcus got a +1 invitation, just in case his wife's trip gets cancelled, and kept checking her phone obsessively. Meanwhile, Caroline was preparing for her dramatic entrance. "I'm getting my hair done," she told me during one of our final planning calls. "If I'm going to blow up my marriage and your engagement in one evening, I'm going to look absolutely stunning while doing it." I had to admire her spirit. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear. The venue was a gorgeous waterfront restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, private dining room for 40 people. I told Bethany I needed to help my college roommate whose car had broken down on the Mass Pike, and suggested she head over early to handle any last-minute details. "Are you sure?" she asked, looking genuinely concerned. "I can wait for you." "No, you go ahead. I'll be there soon." I kissed her forehead, feeling only numbness where affection used to be. I picked up Caroline at her apartment in Brookline at 5:30. She looked incredible in a burgundy cocktail dress, her dark hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. "You ready for this?" I asked as she got in my car. "I've been ready since I saw those screenshots," she said. "Let's go ruin some lives." We arrived at 6:15, 35 minutes after everyone else. I timed it perfectly. I entered the private dining room first, waving to my parents and brothers, making casual small talk. Through the windows, I could see Marcus sitting beside Bethany at the main table, both looking comfortable and familiar with each other in a way that made my jaw clench. Then Caroline made her entrance. The week leading up to the rehearsal dinner had been an exercise in patience and observation. Every wedding planning decision Bethany made suddenly revealed itself in a completely different light, like one of those optical illusions where once you see the hidden image, you can't unsee it. On Monday, she'd insisted we review the seating chart for the third time. "I really think Marcus should be at table 5, she said, moving the little name cards around on our dining table. "He won't know anyone from my side, and your fraternity brothers are always so welcoming." I studied the arrangement carefully. Table 5 was positioned with a perfect, unobstructed view of the head table where Bethany and I would be sitting. From that angle, Marcus would be able to watch her throughout the entire reception. "Sure, that works," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Whatever makes him comfortable." She smiled at me, and I wondered how I'd ever found that smile reassuring. Tuesday brought another interesting development. Bethany wanted Marcus to attend not just the ceremony, but the rehearsal dinner itself. "He's driving all the way from Connecticut," she argued when I questioned whether we needed to include a regular guest at what was typically a family and wedding party only event. "It's nearly 2 hours, Ryan. We can't just have him show up the day of the wedding without any context." "He lives in Cambridge," I pointed out. "That's 45 minutes away." Her face flushed slightly. "Right, I meant Cambridge. I always mix those up. But still, it's far enough that we should be hospitable." The lies were getting sloppier, more desperate. She was so focused on getting Marcus to that rehearsal dinner that she wasn't even keeping her story straight anymore. Wednesday, she spent 3 hours on a phone call in our bedroom with the door closed. When she emerged, she looked flustered and excited, a combination I'd seen before when she was planning something she knew I wouldn't approve of. "Everything okay?" I asked from the couch. "Fine. Just talking to the florist about some last-minute adjustments." Except I'd spoken to the florist myself that morning, confirming the final arrangements, and she'd mentioned Bethany hadn't called in over a week. Thursday brought the most telling moment. I was working from home, and Bethany thought I was on a conference call with headphones on. I heard her on the phone in the kitchen, voice low and intimate. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. It's all going to work perfectly. Just stick to the plan and I'll give you the signal during the ceremony." My blood ran cold. The signal during the ceremony. What the hell did that mean? Friday morning, the day of the rehearsal dinner, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The anxiety and betrayal I'd been feeling for weeks had crystallized into cold determination. Caroline and I had texted back and forth finalizing the details. She was ready. I was ready. At 4:30 p.m., I started my performance. "Babe, I just got a call from Derek," I told Bethany, grabbing my keys. Derek was my college roommate, currently living in Worcester. His car broke down on the Mass Pike and he's stranded. I need to go help him. Bethany looked up from her makeup mirror, eyes wide with concern. Right now? The rehearsal dinner starts at 6. I know. But he's completely stuck. You go ahead and handle any last-minute stuff at the restaurant. I'll meet you there as soon as I can. She bit her lip, clearly torn between wanting me there early and not wanting to seem unreasonable. Okay, but please hurry. I need you there. I promise I'll make it in time. I kissed her forehead, feeling absolutely nothing. I picked up Caroline at her apartment in Brookline at 5:15. She was putting in earrings when she opened the door, the burgundy cocktail dress fitting her perfectly, her dark hair swept up in an elegant style that probably cost a fortune. You look amazing, I said honestly. Thank you. I figured if I'm going to destroy my marriage and your engagement in one evening, I should at least look good doing it. She grabbed a small clutch purse. I've got my phone loaded with screenshots and the credit card statements showing the Newport hotel charges. I'm ready for war. We drove toward the waterfront in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. Are you nervous? Surprisingly, I'm actually more nervous about what happens after. The fallout, the explanations to family, dealing with all the wedding vendors. I glanced at her. I'm furious, she said simply. Marcus and I have been married for 4 years. We were trying for a baby last year. And the whole time, he's been pining after his college girlfriend and planning whatever this is. Her voice cracked slightly. So no, I'm not nervous. I'm angry, and I want them both to feel exactly how we've been feeling. The waterfront restaurant appeared ahead, all warm lighting and harbor views. I parked and we sat there for a moment, watching people move around inside the private dining room through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I could see my parents, my brothers, Bethany's family. And there, sitting beside Bethany at the main table like he belonged there, was Marcus. That's him? Caroline asked. That's him. She studied Marcus through the window, her expression hard. He's wearing the cologne I bought him for our anniversary. The one that cost $200. She laughed without humor. He really dressed up for her. I checked my watch. 6:12 p.m. Ready? Let's do this. We walked in together, but I entered the private dining room first while Caroline waited in the lobby. The room was elegant and warm, round tables set with white linens, the harbor view creating a gorgeous backdrop. My mother spotted me immediately and waved. Ryan, we were starting to worry. Is Derek okay? He's fine. Someone from AAA showed up right after I got there. Sorry I'm late. I made my way around the room, shaking hands with my uncles, hugging my grandmother, making small talk with Bethany's parents. The whole time, I was aware of Marcus and Bethany at the main table, watching me. Bethany looked relieved. Marcus looked relaxed, confident even, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. I deliberately positioned myself near the entrance, talking to my brother about his new job, when I gave Caroline the text signal. 30 seconds later, she walked through the doorway into the private dining room. The effect was immediate and devastating. I watched Marcus's face drain of all color, his eyes going wide with pure panic. Bethany froze mid-sentence, her hands suspended in the air where she'd been gesturing while talking to my aunt. The room didn't go completely silent immediately, but there was a noticeable drop in conversation volume as people registered a new arrival. Caroline moved through the space with the confidence of someone who knows they're about to win. Sweetheart, she called out to Marcus, her voice bright and carrying. Surprise! My Singapore trip got cancelled. The hospital administration changed the scheduling at the last minute, something about needing senior staff for an emergency review. She walked directly toward the main table where Marcus sat frozen beside my fiancée. I hope you don't mind that I crashed your corporate retreat in the Berkshires. The word Berkshires hung in the air like a bomb. Bethany's face flickered with confusion before understanding crashed over her features. Marcus looked like he might actually be sick. Caroline, he managed to choke out. What are you doing here? Attending a rehearsal dinner, apparently. Caroline turned to Bethany with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You must be Bethany. I've heard so much about you. Well, actually, I hadn't heard anything about you until Ryan was kind enough to inform me that my husband has been invited to your wedding. Funny coincidence that his mandatory corporate retreat is the same weekend, don't you think? The room had gone completely silent now. 40 family members and wedding party attendees, all frozen in various states of confusion and dawning realization. My mother, God bless her, was the first to recover her composure. She stood up from her seat and moved toward Caroline with genuine warmth. "You must be Caroline," she said, extending her hand. "Ryan mentioned you might be able to join us after all. We're so glad you could make it. Please, come sit with us." She gestured toward an empty chair that happened to be positioned directly across from Marcus and Bethany, between herself and my younger brother. The seating arrangement couldn't have been more perfect if we'd planned it, which, of course, we had. Caroline settled into her seat gracefully, smoothing her dress and placing her clutch on the table. "Thank you so much for having me. This is such a lovely venue. The harbor view is stunning." She looked directly at Bethany. "You have wonderful taste. I'm sure the wedding itself will be absolutely beautiful." Bethany's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had physically struck her. Marcus was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "Caroline, we should probably talk," he finally managed, starting to stand. "Oh, we can talk right here," Caroline said pleasantly. "I don't think we have any secrets from these lovely people, do we? After all, you and Bethany have been such good friends. I'd love to hear more about your friendship." The servers began bringing out the first course, completely oblivious to the nuclear tension at the main table. I watched as a young woman placed Caesar salads in front of Marcus and Bethany, both of whom looked incapable of eating anything. "Actually," Caroline continued, pulling out her phone with deliberate casualness, "I've been learning so much about your friendship over the past few weeks. Ryan was kind enough to share some of your text conversations with me. Would anyone like to hear them?" My Aunt Margaret, who'd been watching the whole scene with the fascination of someone watching a train wreck, actually leaned forward. "I would," she said, and I nearly laughed at the boldness of it. Caroline smiled at her. "Well, let's see. There's this one from about 3 weeks ago, sent at 1:47 a.m. Bethany wrote, 'Do you ever think about what could have been?' And Marcus responded at 2:03 a.m., all the time. Especially lately." She looked up from her phone. "That's a very intimate thing to discuss with someone else's husband at 2 in the morning, don't you think?" Bethany found her voice, though it came out strangled. "Those messages were taken out of context. We were just reminiscing about college. It was innocent." "Innocent," Caroline repeated, scrolling through her phone. "Is that what we're calling it? How about the shirtless bathroom mirror selfies Marcus sent you from our home gym with captions like, 'Getting back in shape for something special?' That seems less innocent and more deliberately provocative." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Caroline, this is inappropriate. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Caroline's composure cracked slightly, her voice rising. "You've been emotionally cheating on me for months, lying about business retreats, getting yourself invited to your ex-girlfriend's wedding, and I'm the one being inappropriate?" She pulled out another document from her clutch, unfolding it carefully. "Here's something interesting. Credit card statements from 3 months ago. There's a charge for the Harbor View Inn in Newport for $487 on a Saturday night in July." She looked at Bethany. "That's the same weekend you posted Instagram stories about your girl's weekend, isn't it? I saved them. Want to see?" Bethany's father, a retired police lieutenant with a face like granite, stood up from his table. "Bethany Marie, what the hell is going on here?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Daddy, this is a misunderstanding," Bethany started, but her voice was shaking. "Ryan invaded my privacy and, don't you dare try to make this about privacy," I cut her off, speaking for the first time since Caroline had entered. "You invited your ex-boyfriend to our wedding under false pretenses. You've been having an emotional affair for months. You lied about his wife being in Singapore so I wouldn't question why she wasn't invited. This isn't about privacy, it's about betrayal." My father, normally a quiet man who avoided conflict, nodded grimly. "Son's right. This is about character, not privacy." Bethany turned her anger on me fully now, tears streaming down her face, but they looked more like fury than remorse. "You orchestrated this whole thing. You brought his wife here to humiliate me in front of everyone. I brought her here because she deserved to know the truth, I said calmly. Just like I deserve to know the truth before marrying someone who's still in love with her ex-boyfriend. I'm not in love with Marcus. The desperation in her voice was palpable now, the careful facade crumbling. He's just a friend. You're being jealous and insecure and ruining everything. Caroline laughed, sharp and bitter. A friend you meet at hotels? A friend you send late-night messages to about what could have been? I've been married to Marcus for 4 years. I know what emotional infidelity looks like, and honey, that's exactly what this is. Marcus had been trying to edge toward the exit, but my brother casually stood up and blocked his path, arms crossed. At 6'3" and a former college linebacker, he made an effective barrier. I don't think you're going anywhere yet, man. This conversation isn't finished. The hell it isn't, Marcus said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He looked defeated, trapped, like he'd walked into a situation he'd drastically underestimated. Bethany's mother was crying quietly, her face buried in her hands. Her father looked like he wanted to flip the entire table. My mother kept her hand on Caroline's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that made my chest tighten with gratitude. There's more, Caroline said, and I could hear the pain underneath her anger now. I found a draft email in Marcus's account yesterday. Want to know what it said? She didn't wait for an answer. It was titled, Wedding Objection Draft, and it outlined exactly what he planned to say when the officiant asked if anyone knew why Ryan and Bethany shouldn't marry. He'd practiced specific phrases. He was literally going to object during your ceremony. The room erupted. My aunts gasped. Bethany's father swore loudly. My grandmother clutched her pearls like something out of a movie. But I just stared at Bethany, watching her face cycle through denial, panic, and finally resignation. He wasn't supposed to actually do it, she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. What? I leaned forward. What did you just say? He wasn't supposed to actually object. It was just supposed to be there as an option, in case I gave the signal. In case I decided I couldn't go through with it. Her voice broke completely. I needed to know if I was settling for your stability over his passion. I needed to test my feelings. The confession hung in the air like smoke. She just admitted in front of 40 people that she'd been planning to use our wedding ceremony as her personal emotional decision point between two men. That she'd been prepared to humiliate me at the altar if she decided Marcus was the better option. You were going to let him object, I said slowly, each word deliberate. You invited him to our wedding with a prearranged signal, ready to throw away 3 years and embarrass both families, just to test your feelings. I didn't know what I wanted. Bethany was sobbing now, mascara running down her face. You're safe and stable and perfect on paper, but Marcus makes me feel alive. I thought if I saw you both in the same place at the wedding, I'd finally know for sure. My father made a sound of pure disgust. My mother looked at Bethany with something close to pity. Caroline just shook her head. You're a piece of work, Caroline told her. Both of you are. She looked at Marcus, who'd finally stopped trying to escape. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. I'm taking half of everything, including that ridiculous Corvette you think I don't know you've been hiding money to buy. Actually, especially the Corvette. Caroline, please, Marcus finally spoke, his voice desperate. We can talk about this privately. We can work through this. Work through you planning to object at another woman's wedding? Work through you lying to me for months? Work through you meeting your ex at hotels? She stood up, gathering her clutch. No. We're done. My lawyer will be in touch. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope I'd prepared earlier. Inside were copies of every major wedding vendor invoice, all in my name since Bethany's family had insisted on traditional arrangements where the groom handles the major expenses. Vineyard venue, catering, band, florist, photographer. $24,000 total in deposits. The wedding is canceled, I announced to the room. I've already started making calls to vendors. Whatever deposits can be refunded will go back to my accounts. If anyone wants to try to salvage any vendor relationships, you're welcome to reimburse me for the non-refundable portions. I slid the envelope across the table to Bethany's father. Here's a complete breakdown. Bethany's father took the envelope with shaking hands, looking at his daughter with pure disappointment. $24,000, he repeated. You threw away a good man and $24,000 to play games with your ex-boyfriend? I wasn't playing games. Bethany shrieked, but nobody was listening anymore. Caroline was already walking toward the exit, her head held high. I followed her, leaving Bethany sobbing at the table with her family around her. At the doorway, I turned back one last time. Marcus was already slipping out a side exit, a coward to the very end. Bethany sat alone at what should have been our celebration, surrounded by wedding party members who were now staring at her with a mixture of shock and judgment. Outside the restaurant, the cold October air hit my face like a wake-up call. Caroline stood by the railing overlooking the harbor, her shoulders shaking slightly. I approached carefully, unsure if she wanted company or solitude. You okay? I asked, immediately recognizing how stupid the question was. No, she said honestly, turning to face me. Her makeup was smudged now, tears finally breaking through the armor she'd maintained inside. But I will be. Eventually. She laughed, wiping her eyes. God, that was simultaneously the most empowering and devastating thing I've ever done. You were incredible in there. I mean it. So were you. She studied my face. How are you feeling? Honestly? Relieved. Angry. But mostly relieved that I found out before we actually got married. I leaned against the railing beside her. Can you imagine if Marcus had actually objected during the ceremony? If I'd found out like that? That draft email, Caroline said, shaking her head. I couldn't believe it when I found it yesterday. He had specific phrases planned. I object because I'm still in love with the bride. Bethany and I have unfinished business. He was going to humiliate you in front of everyone you know. Thanks to you, that never happened. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching boats move across the dark water. Inside the restaurant, I could hear raised voices, probably Bethany's father reading her the riot act. My phone started buzzing incessantly in my pocket, but I ignored it. What happens now? Caroline asked. For you? I start making vendor calls tomorrow. Try to recover what money I can. Deal with the fallout. Move on with my life. I looked at her. What about you? Lawyer on Monday, like I said. I already called my brother earlier this week and he's helping me line everything up. Marcus is going to lose that Cambridge condo, half his retirement accounts, and yes, definitely the Corvette. She smiled grimly. He's been hiding money in a separate account for over a year. I found the statements. Turns out that's not legal in Massachusetts when you're married. But take him for everything he's got. My phone buzzed again and I finally checked it. 17 missed calls from Bethany. 12 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Ryan, please come back, we need to talk. I can explain everything. Don't throw away 3 years. I love you, it's always been you. Marcus meant nothing, I swear. I showed a few to Caroline. She snorted. Classic. Now that her backup plan exploded in her face, suddenly you're the love of her life again. That's what I figured. I blocked Bethany's number and tucked my phone away. I should probably go back inside and deal with my family. I should get going. This was enough drama for one lifetime. Caroline straightened her dress and checked her reflection in her phone camera, fixing her smudged makeup. Thank you, Ryan, for telling me the truth. For giving me the chance to confront them together. A lot of guys would have just called off the wedding quietly and let me keep living in ignorance. You deserve to know. Nobody deserves to be lied to like that. We exchanged a brief hug, and then she was walking toward the parking lot. I watched her go, this woman I'd only known for 3 weeks but who'd become an unlikely ally in the worst situation of my life. When I went back inside, the private dining room had mostly cleared out. My parents and brothers were still there, along with Bethany's parents and a few scattered relatives. Bethany herself was gone, apparently fled to lick her wounds elsewhere. My mother hugged me immediately. I'm so proud of you, she said quietly. That took courage. I'm sorry dinner got ruined. Don't you dare apologize. My father clapped me on the shoulder. That girl showed her true colors before you made a legal commitment. That's a blessing, not a disaster. Bethany's father approached, still holding the envelope I'd given him. Ryan, I don't even know what to say. I'm mortified. Absolutely mortified by my daughter's behavior. Mr. Patterson, you don't need to apologize for her choices. The hell I don't. She was raised better than this. He looked at the invoice breakdown. I'll write you a check for half of this. It's the least I can do. You don't have to do that. I insist. Bethany's mother and I will cover $12,000. Consider it an apology for what she put you through. He paused. And Ryan? You're a good man. You'll find someone who deserves you. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and damage control. Some vendors were surprisingly understanding. The florist refunded 60%, sympathetic to the situation. The photographer refunded everything since they hadn't shot anything yet. The vineyard kept the $5,000 deposit but wished me well. The band was the most difficult, refusing to refund anything, but I'd expected that. My apartment became a refuge. I took 3 days off work, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie. I ordered takeout, ignored my phone except for vendor calls, and tried to process everything that had happened. On day 2, Bethany showed up at my building. The doorman called up, and I told him not to let her up. She waited in the lobby for an hour before finally leaving. That night, she tried a different approach. My doorbell rang at 11:30 p.m., and when I checked the security camera, there she was. She'd somehow convinced another resident to let her into the building. She was wearing the black lingerie set I'd bought her for our anniversary, with just a long coat over it, holding a bottle of expensive whiskey. Ryan, please. Her voice came through the intercom. We need to talk. I made a terrible mistake. Let me make it right. Go home, Bethany. I love you. I was confused and stupid, but I know now that you're what I want. You're what I've always wanted. If I was what you wanted, you wouldn't have needed to test your feelings by inviting your ex to our wedding. That was insecurity. I was scared of settling down, scared of making the wrong choice. But standing there watching you walk away, I realized you were the right choice all along. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You didn't realize anything, Bethany. You just lost your backup plan and now you're trying to salvage your first option. I'm not interested. Ryan, please. 3 years together has to mean something. It did mean something. It meant I learned what I don't want in a partner. Someone who sees me as safe and stable rather than exciting. Someone who keeps her ex-boyfriend as a backup plan. Someone who would humiliate me at our own wedding just to figure out her feelings. I wouldn't have actually let him object. That was just a safety net. A safety net. Exactly like I was your safety net. Your stable, boring fallback option. I could see her crying on the camera, mascara running again. You're not boring. You're wonderful and thoughtful and perfect. For someone else. Not for you. Go home. She stayed there for another 20 minutes before finally leaving. I watched on the security camera as she walked down the hallway, shoulders slumped, coat barely covering the lingerie. When manipulation failed, Bethany moved to phase 3, social media warfare. She posted a long, carefully crafted story on Instagram about privacy violations, controlling behavior, and how sometimes the people you trust most betray you in unimaginable ways. She painted herself as the victim of my jealousy and insecurity, a woman who'd only been trying to maintain healthy friendships while her fiancé invaded her privacy and orchestrated a public humiliation. The comments were initially sympathetic. Her friends rallied around her, posting heart emojis and messages of support. You deserve better. His loss. King behavior recognizes king behavior, and he clearly wasn't king material. I didn't respond. Didn't engage. Just watched the narrative she was building with detached curiosity. Caroline, however, had no such restraint. She'd apparently been monitoring the situation through mutual friends, and 3 hours after Bethany's post went up, Caroline posted her own response. She included carefully selected screenshots, Marcus's shirtless gym selfies with the caption, "Getting back in shape for something special." The 2 a.m. text exchange about what could have been. The credit card statement showing the Newport hotel charge alongside Bethany's Instagram story from that same weekend claiming she was with girlfriends. And the absolute knockout punch, a partial screenshot of Marcus's draft email, showing just enough of his planned wedding objection to make the intention crystal clear. Caroline's caption was simple: the truth about healthy friendships and who the real victim is here. Some people rewrite history when the present doesn't work out in their favor. The response was immediate and brutal. Bethany's comments section flooded with questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Her carefully constructed victim narrative collapsed in real time. Within an hour, she deleted her original post, but the screenshots had already spread through our entire social circle. My phone exploded with messages from friends I hadn't heard from in years. Dude, is this real? Holy hell, she was planning to let him object? You dodged a nuclear missile. I responded to a few, kept it brief and dignified. Yes, it was real. Yes, I was doing okay. No, I didn't want to discuss it further. But the absolute pinnacle of the digital warfare came when one of Caroline's friends, someone with apparently superior internet stalking skills, discovered something truly remarkable. Marcus's original wedding objection draft wasn't just a draft. He'd sent it to someone for feedback. That someone was his older brother, who'd apparently replied with detailed advice on how to make the objection more emotionally impactful, suggesting specific gestures and timing. They'd planned this together, workshopped it like a screenplay. Caroline posted those screenshots too. The internet lost its collective mind. By the end of the week, Bethany had deleted all her social media accounts. Marcus had been fired from his consulting firm after the screenshots went viral within his professional network, apparently objecting at weddings and planning emotional affairs didn't align with their corporate values. The digital fallout had exceeded anything I could have imagined, but I was already moving forward. Saturday arrived, what should have been my wedding day. I woke up early, not with dread or sadness, but with a strange sense of freedom. My college roommate Derek, the one I'd supposedly been helping on the Mass Pike, called at 7 a.m. Dude, deep sea fishing charter. I've got 8 guys lined up, all your groomsmen. We're going out to Stellwagen Bank. You in? Absolutely. By 9 a.m., I was on a boat heading out of Boston Harbor toward Cape Cod, surrounded by my closest friends, beer in hand, ocean spray in my face. It was perfect. My brother raised his bottle. To Ryan, who dodged the worst mistake of his life. Everyone cheered. We spent the day catching striped bass and bluefish, trading stories, not mentioning Bethany or Marcus once after that initial toast. Just guys being guys, celebrating freedom and friendship. Meanwhile, according to my mother who couldn't resist texting updates, Bethany had apparently driven to the vineyard venue anyway. She'd put on her wedding dress, full hair and makeup, and showed up alone at the venue that had canceled our booking 2 days prior. She took photos of herself in the dress, standing in the parking lot since they wouldn't let her onto the property, and posted them to a temporary Instagram account she'd created. The captions were melodramatic quotes about surviving betrayal and rising from ashes. The photos got maybe 20 likes before people started commenting about how disturbing and unhinged the behavior was. She deleted those within hours too. She showed up in her wedding dress? Derek asked when I told him, laughing so hard he nearly dropped his fishing rod. That's absolutely insane. She's trying to control the narrative. Make herself look like the heartbroken victim instead of the person who orchestrated the whole mess. I reeled in another fish, feeling the weight and pull of something real, something honest. Let her have her performance. I'm here living my actual life. We came back to dock at sunset, sunburned and happy, with enough fish to fill 3 coolers. That night, my groomsmen and I had dinner at a steakhouse, the expensive kind that Bethany always wanted to go to but I'd avoided because of the prices. We ordered appetizers, premium steaks, top-shelf whiskey. I paid for everything without even checking the total, something I could now afford because I wasn't subsidizing someone else's fantasy lifestyle. You seem different, my brother observed as we were leaving. More relaxed. I feel different. Lighter. It was true. The weight I'd been carrying for months, maybe even years, had lifted. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending trying to be enough for someone who'd never really wanted me. The following week brought news through mutual friends. Marcus had moved out of his Cambridge condo, which was being sold as part of the divorce settlement. He'd taken a job in some suburban office park making a fraction of what he used to, his reputation in the Boston consulting world completely destroyed. Caroline's lawyer was ruthless, and Massachusetts divorce laws favored her since Marcus's affair was documented so thoroughly. She got the house, half his retirement accounts, alimony for 3 years, and yes, the Corvette he'd been secretly buying. Caroline had sent me a photo of herself sitting in the driver's seat, holding the keys, with a huge grin. The caption, "Best divorce prize ever. Want to go for a ride sometime?" I'd laughed and congratulated her. We'd stayed in touch, occasional texts checking in on each other, two people bonded by a shared trauma that had somehow turned into mutual victory. Bethany's situation was less triumphant. She'd moved back to her childhood home in Newton, living in her bedroom with her parents. Her job at the nonprofit was still intact, but her social circle had evaporated. The friends who'd initially rallied around her had quietly distanced themselves after Caroline's evidence dump, and the wedding party members who'd witnessed the rehearsal dinner confrontation had spread the story throughout our entire network. She tried reaching out to me twice more through mutual friends, asking if we could meet for coffee, just to talk. I declined both times. There was nothing left to say. A month after the canceled wedding, I did something I'd been putting off for years. I booked a solo trip. 1 month through Argentina and Chile, using the money I'd gotten back from vendor refunds and what I'd been saving for the honeymoon. I'd always wanted to see Patagonia, wanted to do wine tasting in Mendoza, wanted to trek through Torres del Paine. Bethany had always shot down my South America ideas, claiming she wanted to go somewhere with better resorts and shopping. Now I could go wherever I wanted. The trip changed my perspective on everything. Hiking through mountains that made Boston's problems seem microscopic. Drinking wine that cost $3 a bottle but tasted better than anything I'd had in expensive restaurants. Meeting people from around the world who didn't know anything about rehearsal dinner disasters or canceled weddings. In Mendoza, at a wine tasting at a small family vineyard, I met Isabella. She was from Seattle, an environmental scientist doing research on sustainable agriculture, with a smile that made me forget to taste my wine properly. We started talking about soil composition and somehow 3 hours passed without either of us noticing. "So what brings you to Argentina alone?" she asked over dinner that night at a restaurant she'd recommended. I told her I'd just gotten out of a relationship, keeping it vague. But something about the wine and the warm night and her genuine interest made me tell her the whole story. The rehearsal dinner, the wedding objection draft, Caroline's entrance, all of it. Isabella listened with increasingly wide eyes, occasionally interrupting with gasps or questions. When I finished, she stared at me for a long moment, then burst out laughing. Not cruel laughter, but genuine, incredulous amusement. "I'm sorry," she managed between laughs. "I'm not laughing at you, I swear. I'm laughing at the absolute audacity of your ex-fiancée thinking she could pull that off. And the fact that you and this Caroline woman teamed up like some kind of revenge squad. That's actually brilliant. It felt necessary at the time. It was necessary. Can you imagine if you'd actually married her? If you'd found out after you had kids and a mortgage together?" She shook her head. "You didn't just dodge a bullet, you dodged a nuclear weapon." We spent the next week traveling together, completely unplanned but feeling entirely natural. Isabella was thoughtful, hilarious, and had this way of pointing out things I'd never noticed about myself. "You apologize constantly," she observed one day as we were hiking near Aconcagua. "For normal things like asking questions or having opinions. It's like you're always expecting someone to be annoyed with you." She was right. Living with Bethany had trained me to minimize myself, to apologize for taking up space. "Working on it," I said. "Good. Because you're actually pretty interesting when you stop apologizing for existing." On our third date, if you could call traveling together dating, we were watching sunset over the Andes and Isabella turned to me. "I have a confession. I Googled you after you told me that story." "Oh no." "Oh yes. Found your ex's deleted Instagram posts, the whole rehearsal dinner scandal, everything. The internet is forever. She paused. And I have to say, the photos I found of you, you look so much happier in the ones you've posted recently. Like you're actually yourself instead of performing being someone. That's exactly how it felt. Like I was constantly auditioning for the role of good enough boyfriend. Well, you're way more than good enough. You're actually pretty great. She kissed me, and it felt like starting over in the best possible way. We exchanged contact information when we parted ways 2 weeks later, her heading back to Seattle for work, me continuing south toward Patagonia. But we texted constantly, video called when time zones allowed, made plans to visit each other. By the time I returned to Boston 6 weeks after leaving, I'd already booked a flight to Seattle for the following month. My apartment felt different when I got back, cleaner somehow, even though nothing had physically changed. All of Bethany's stuff was long gone, the space was completely mine now, and I'd started redecorating during my trip, ordering furniture online that reflected my actual taste instead of our compromised aesthetic. Work welcomed me back with a surprise, a promotion to senior analyst that had been in the works before the wedding drama. My boss pulled me aside the first day back. Heard you had a rough few months. Glad to see you're doing better. Also, we're giving you the Henderson portfolio. Congratulations. Life was actively improving, not just recovering but actually getting better than it had been. 2 months after my return, Caroline reached out with an invitation. Drinks? I have updates and I think you'll appreciate them. We met at a wine bar in Back Bay, the kind of place with low lighting and comfortable chairs. Caroline looked phenomenal, her hair cut in a new style, wearing what was clearly an expensive dress, radiating confidence. You look amazing, I said honestly. Divorce agrees with me. She grinned. Got my promotion to head pediatric nurse. Bought out Marcus's share of our house. And I started dating someone. That's fantastic. Who's the lucky person? His name is Dr. James Mitchell, orthopedic surgeon, widower with a teenage daughter. Met him at the hospital gym. He's kind, stable, thinks my Corvette is hilarious, and most importantly, he's never once made me feel like I'm not enough. She raised her glass. To finding people who actually deserve us. I'll drink to that. We caught up on everything. Her divorce had finalized. Marcus was apparently miserable in his new life, working some corporate job in the suburbs and living in a studio apartment in Quincy. His brother, the one who'd helped workshop the wedding objection, had publicly disowned him after the screenshots went viral, claiming he'd been joking and never thought Marcus would actually consider it. Liar, Caroline said cheerfully. But whatever helps him sleep at night. What about Bethany? I asked, not because I cared deeply but because I was curious. Still living with her parents from what I hear. Still working at the nonprofit. Her friend group completely abandoned her after everything came out. Apparently she's in therapy now, which is probably a good thing. She paused. Her father still sends Christmas cards to my parents, apologizing for her behavior. He reimbursed me for half the wedding expenses. $12,000. But that's the least he could do. Caroline studied me. You seem really happy, Ryan. Different from the stressed out guy I met 3 months ago who was planning a wedding to the wrong person. I am happy. Genuinely. I told her about Isabella, about our plans, about how different it felt to be with someone who appreciated me instead of tolerated me. Bring her to Boston. I want to meet her. James and I can double date with you guys. She'd love that. Fair warning, she thinks our rehearsal dinner revenge story is the funniest thing she's ever heard. It kind of is in retrospect. Caroline laughed. Though living through it was absolutely terrifying. The holidays came, my first since the canceled wedding. Isabella flew to Boston for Thanksgiving, meeting my family and completely charming everyone. My mother pulled me aside while Isabella was helping with dishes. She's wonderful. Don't screw this up. Planning not to. Christmas brought an unexpected gift. A card from Bethany's father with a handwritten note thanking me for revealing his daughter's true character before children and legal entanglements made everything more complicated. It also included a check for another $3,000, his share of vendor fees that had ultimately been non-refundable. I deposited the check and used it to buy Isabella a plane ticket to visit again in January. 3 months after what should have been my wedding day, I was living a life I couldn't have imagined during those dark days of planning a ceremony that was secretly designed as someone else's emotional decision point. Isabella had become a constant in my life, flying between Seattle and Boston every few weeks, making plans that felt genuine and mutual instead of one-sided compromises. We talked about her potentially relocating to Boston or me moving to Seattle, but we were taking our time, actually building something real instead of rushing toward arbitrary milestones. The contrast between my relationship with Isabella and what I'd had with Bethany was stark and illuminating. Isabella insisted on splitting every check, wouldn't let me pay for her flights, contributed equally to everything we did together. When I tried to pay for dinner one night, she'd actually gotten annoyed. "I make good money, Ryan. I don't need you to take care of me financially. I want a partner, not a provider." It was refreshing and occasionally jarring, relearning what an equal relationship actually looked like. Through mutual friends, I heard occasional updates about Bethany that I didn't ask for, but people seemed compelled to share anyway. She was apparently still living in her childhood bedroom in Newton, the one with the posters from her college years and the twin bed she'd slept in through high school. Her nonprofit job was still intact, but she'd been passed over for a promotion that everyone knew she'd been counting on. Her social life had essentially evaporated. The friend group she'd cultivated for years had quietly distanced themselves after the rehearsal dinner scandal became public knowledge. She posted some vague quote about surviving toxic people, my friend Lisa reported during a group dinner. Got like 15 likes. It was kind of sad actually. "Everything she posts is about surviving and healing from toxic people," someone else added. Like she's completely rewritten history where she's the victim of everyone else's behavior instead of the architect of her own disaster. I didn't comment, just nodded and changed the subject. Bethany's narrative reconstruction wasn't my problem anymore. Her family had apparently insisted she start therapy after she'd shown up at the vineyard in her wedding dress, recognizing that the behavior indicated some deeper issues. According to her father, who still occasionally sent my parents updates, she was finally confronting some of her patterns around security and validation. Marcus's situation was even more dramatically altered. He'd lost everything that mattered to him: his Cambridge condo, his prestigious consulting career, his marriage, his reputation, half his retirement savings, and the Corvette he'd been secretly saving for. Caroline had been absolutely ruthless in the divorce proceedings, and Massachusetts law had favored her completely given the documented evidence of Marcus's emotional affair and deception. He was living in a cramped studio apartment in Quincy, working a corporate middle management job that paid less than half his previous salary, commuting an hour each way on the T. His brother, the one who'd helped workshop the wedding objection script, had publicly distanced himself after the screenshots went viral, claiming he'd been joking and never expected Marcus to seriously consider disrupting someone's wedding. The professional consequences had extended beyond just losing his job. Marcus's LinkedIn profile, which used to showcase his consulting achievements and extensive network, now had a fraction of his previous connections. Several former colleagues had apparently written public recommendations calling him unethical and untrustworthy after the story spread through Boston's tight-knit business community. Caroline had moved on spectacularly. Her relationship with Dr. James Mitchell was thriving, and they'd recently gotten engaged. She'd sent me a photo of the ring with a message that made me laugh out loud. He proposed at the hospital cafeteria where we had our first conversation. It was perfect and genuine and nothing like the manipulative games Marcus played. Also, I'm keeping my last name because I earned it through that divorce. Isabella and I had become friends with Caroline and James, the four of us occasionally meeting for dinners or weekend activities. The dynamic was comfortable and easy, bonded by shared history but focused on present happiness. Isabella and Caroline had particularly hit it off, occasionally meeting for brunch without James and me, forming their own friendship independent of the circumstances that had brought everyone together. "I love that you stayed friends with your ex's husband's ex-wife," Isabella had said after one of these brunches. "That's so beautifully complicated and weird." "Caroline's great. We survived something bizarre together. That creates a bond. Plus she drives that ridiculous Corvette and isn't afraid to tell James when he's being Dr. Mansplain why. I respect that." In February, the wedding venue reached out with an unusual request. They wanted to use security footage from our rehearsal dinner, appropriately edited and anonymized, for staff training on handling dramatic situations. Apparently, our evening had become legendary among Boston event venues, discussed in hospitality forums as the ultimate example of unexpected guest conflict. "We'd compensate you, of course," the events manager explained. "And we'd never identify anyone involved. But the way your family and the other woman handled the situation with grace under pressure, it's genuinely useful for training purposes." I agreed, finding the whole thing absurdly funny. Our disaster had become an educational tool. They sent me $500 and a bottle of expensive wine as thanks. I split the money with Caroline, who thought it was hilarious. "We should get royalties every time someone watches us destroy our respective relationships in real time," she joked. The rehearsal dinner from hell, now available for corporate training purposes. March brought an unexpected encounter. I was having coffee with Isabella at a place in Cambridge, discussing her potential job offers in Boston, when I saw her. Bethany, looking smaller somehow, sitting alone at a corner table with a laptop and untouched lot. She was wearing clothes that looked expensive but worn, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes visible even from across the room. She spotted me at the same moment I saw her. Our eyes met, and I watched a series of emotions cross her face: surprise, panic, shame, something that might have been hope. She started to stand, then seemed to think better of it, sinking back into her chair. "That's her, isn't it?" Isabella asked, following my gaze. "Yeah, that's Bethany. She looks rough. 3 months of living with the consequences of your choices will do that." I turned back to Isabella, deliberately choosing not to engage. "So, the job offer from the environmental firm in Cambridge, what are you thinking?" Isabella studied me for a moment, then smiled. "I'm thinking I should accept it. I'm thinking Boston might be good for both of us." "Really?" I felt something warm and hopeful bloom in my chest. "Really? The work is interesting, the pay is solid, and there's this guy I've been seeing who makes me laugh and never makes me feel like I'm too much or not enough." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Plus Caroline and I have brunch plans that require geographic proximity." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Bethany watching us, her face crumbling as she witnessed the easy intimacy between Isabella and me. The comfortable way we held hands, the genuine laughter, the planning of an actual shared future. Everything she'd thrown away was now being built with someone else. I didn't feel triumph watching her pain, didn't feel vindicated or satisfied. I felt nothing at all, which was somehow more significant than anger or resentment would have been. She'd become a cautionary tale in my history, not a wound that still hurt. We left the coffee shop hand in hand, Isabella talking excitedly about apartment hunting and furniture shopping, making plans that included us both equally. I didn't look back at Bethany sitting alone with her untouched latte and whatever regrets she was nursing. By April, Isabella had officially relocated to Boston, taking an apartment in Brookline while we continued taking things at a measured pace. No rushing toward engagement or marriage, just building something solid and real. She'd met all my friends and family, been unanimously approved, and had even bonded with my mother over their shared love of true crime podcasts. One Saturday afternoon, Caroline invited us to a barbecue at her house, the one she'd bought out from Marcus in the divorce. It was a gorgeous spring day, her backyard filled with friends and colleagues, James expertly manning the grill while Caroline showed off the garden she'd been cultivating. "This used to be Marcus's man cave patio," she told Isabella, gesturing at the space now filled with flowering plants and comfortable seating. "He had a massive TV and a beer fridge out here. I ripped it all out and made it actually beautiful." "Upgrade," Isabella said approvingly. Later, as the sun was setting and people were starting to leave, Caroline pulled me aside. "I heard Bethany reached out to mutual friends asking about you. Wanted to know if you were happy." "What did people tell her?" "The truth. That you're thriving. New relationship, promotion at work, seemed genuinely content." She paused. "I think she finally understands what she lost. But maybe she'll treat the next person better. Maybe. Though according to her father, She hasn't dated anyone since everything happened. Too afraid of being hurt again, apparently. Caroline shook her head. The irony. I looked across the yard at Isabella, who was laughing at something James was saying, completely at ease and genuine. I'm glad everything happened the way it did. If Bethany hadn't invited Marcus to the wedding, if we'd actually gotten married, I never would have met Isabella. Never would have learned what I actually deserve. Same. If Marcus hadn't been stupid enough to leave evidence everywhere, I might have stayed in that marriage for years. Now I have James, my house, that ridiculous Corvette, and no regrets whatsoever. She clinked her beer bottle against mine. To dodged bullets. To second chances, I countered. By summer, I'd bought a ring. Nothing extravagant or desperate, just a beautiful vintage piece I'd found at an estate sale that somehow perfectly captured Isabella's style. Elegant but practical, with a history but looking forward. I was planning to propose on Christmas morning, 9 months after we'd first met in that Mendoza vineyard, giving us plenty of time to be absolutely certain. No rushing, no pressure, just two people who'd found each other and decided to build something lasting. I showed the ring to Caroline one afternoon when we met for coffee, wanting a woman's opinion. She held it up to the light, examining it carefully. It's perfect. She's going to love it. She handed it back. You seem different from the guy I met 6 months ago. More settled in yourself. I feel different. Like I finally understand what I was missing with Bethany. It wasn't passion or excitement or whatever she thought Marcus offered. It was actual partnership. Mutual respect. Someone who sees you as an equal instead of a safety net or a provider or an emotional backup plan. That's exactly it. Caroline smiled. James and I are getting married next spring. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Obviously you and Isabella are invited. Obviously we'll be there. As long as there's no dramatic ex-boyfriend situations planned. Gonna. Though the rehearsal dinner might be boring by comparison to ours. We both laughed, the shared trauma now transformed into inside jokes and genuine friendship. The last I heard about Bethany came through her father, who'd sent my parents a Christmas card in July, thanking them for their kindness during everything and apologizing again for his daughter's behavior. He included a brief update. She was still in therapy, still living at home, still working on herself. She'd apparently asked him to convey that she was sorry, truly sorry, and hoped I was happy. I didn't respond, but I appreciated the closure of knowing she was at least working on her issues. Marcus's updates were less sympathetic. According to Caroline's lawyer, he tried to reduce his alimony payments claiming financial hardship, but the judge had denied the request given that his financial problems were self-inflicted consequences of his own behavior. He was still living in the Quincy studio, still working the soul-crushing corporate job, still completely ostracized from his previous social and professional circles. I almost feel bad for him, Caroline had said when she told me. Almost. Then I remember the wedding objection draft and I stopped feeling bad. Tonight, I'm having dinner with Isabella at our favorite Italian place, the same restaurant where we had our first real date after she moved to Boston. She thinks we're just celebrating her work project success, but I'm actually planning to propose early, unable to wait until Christmas because why wait when you know something is right? The ring is in my jacket pocket, and I feel nothing but certainty and joy. No anxiety, no second-guessing, no wondering if I'm enough or if she's settling. Just the quiet confidence that comes from being chosen by someone who actually wants to choose you. Bethany taught me what I don't want, what I won't tolerate, what I deserve better than. Isabella taught me what love actually looks like when both people are fully present and genuine. And Caroline, unexpectedly, taught me that sometimes the worst situations create the best alliances and that revenge, when executed with precision and dignity, can actually be the foundation for genuine friendship. As I'm getting ready, adjusting my tie and checking the ring box one more time, my phone buzzes with a message from Caroline. Good luck tonight. She's going to say yes. And thanks for being the best divorce buddy a person could ask for. The rehearsal dinner from hell changed both our lives for the better. She's right. It did. What Bethany meant as her emotional backup plan became my liberation. What should have been the worst night of my life became the catalyst for everything good that followed. I text back, Thanks for being brave enough to walk into that restaurant. We both dodged nuclear weapons. Her response is immediate. We really did. Now go get engaged to someone who actually deserves you. I pocket my phone, grab my keys, and head out into the warm summer evening. Somewhere across the city, Bethany is probably still living in her childhood bedroom, still processing what she lost and why. Marcus is probably in his studio apartment, eating takeout and wondering how his life went so spectacularly wrong. But I'm heading toward a future I actually want with someone who wants it with me, and that's the only revenge that really matters. Living well, choosing better, and never looking back.